If you want to absolutely guarantee that your company will eventually collapse, there is actually a surprisingly proven formula you can follow.
Yeah, it's a pretty wild formula, but it works almost every time.
Right. First, you listen closely to your best customers. Then, you invest heavily in your most profitable products. And finally, you hire top-tier management to oversee all of it.
And, do those three things, and you are almost certainly planting the seeds of your own destruction.
Welcome to today's deep dive. We are taking you through a stack of research centered around Clayton M. Christensen's landmark work, The Innovator's Dilemma.
It's such a fascinating piece of research.
It really is. Our mission today is to solve a massive paradox, which is why do great, well-managed companies lose their market dominance? We always assume corporate failure comes down to arrogance or, bureaucracy or just sheer incompetence.
But the data reveals something entirely different. They fail precisely because they employ what are universally considered, good management practices.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because on the surface, tell people to stop listening to their best customers, and that sounds like a surefire way to get fired.
Oh, absolutely. It completely upends how we evaluate leadership.
But I promise you, by the end of this deep dive, you are going to have a completely new lens for viewing success, failure, and innovation. Whether you are analyzing a Fortune 500 company or just looking at the trajectory of your own career.
To really grasp how and why giant companies die, we need a laboratory. We basically need to observe an industry that lives and dies at warp speed.
Right, the fruit flies in the business world.
Exactly.
Yeah.
In biology, geneticists study fruit flies because their life cycles are so incredibly short. You can observe generational evolution, mutation, and extinction happen in a matter of days.
So if you want to see corporate evolution happen at that kind of blistering, highly observable speed, you study the disk drive industry.
Yeah, because the pace of change in the disk drive market is just staggering.
Looking at the historical data here, between 1967 and 1995, the amount of memory you could pack into a square inch of disk surface increased by 35% every single year.
And at the exact same time, the price per megabyte dropped by 5% every quarter for over 2 decades.
Every single quarter. That is a relentless environment where any strategic mistake is instantly fatal.
It is. And because that environment accelerates everything, we get a crystal clear view of a pattern that repeats over and over.
Right.
When you analyze all the technological shifts in this industry, they consistently fall into two distinct categories. The first is what the research calls sustaining technology.
Sustaining technologies are the innovations that improve the performance of established products, right? Giving mainstream customers more of what they already want.
Exactly. In disk drives, this was the shift from old ferret heads to thin film heads. It was a wildly complex leap in physics and manufacturing.
Costing hundreds of millions of dollars in R&D.
Yes, but here's the critical takeaway. Incumbent leaders almost always win these sustaining technology battles.
No matter how difficult or expensive the tech is, if it helps established companies serve their current clients better, they figure it out and crush the competition.
They win because their entire corporate apparatus, their engineers, marketing teams, financial models is completely optimized for sustaining improvements.
But the danger arrives with the second type of change, right? Disruptive technology.
That's where the giants fall. Disruptive technology is insidious because in the near term, it actually brings worse product performance.
It doesn't look like a threat at all.
Not at all. It is usually cheaper, simpler, smaller, and significantly less powerful than what the market leader is currently selling.
So it's like if a car company spends $1 billion making a slightly faster sports car for their wealthy clients, they'll succeed because that's their whole business model.
Right.
But if a startup invents a cheap, slow, weird-looking golf cart, the big car company just ignores it.
What's fascinating here is that your golf cart analogy perfectly captures the mechanism of disruption. Yeah, the incumbent car company ignores the golf cart because their mainstream customers, the sports car buyers, have zero use for a vehicle that pops out at 15 miles an hour.
Obviously not.
But the hidden mechanism at play is the trajectory of technological improvement. The pace at which technology improves is almost always faster than the pace at which the market's actual needs increase.
So the golf cart gets better every year.
Exactly. Eventually it hits 60 miles an hour, gets a roof, passes safety tests.
And by the time the established sports car company realizes this golf cart has become a viable, incredibly cheap commuter vehicle, it is too late. The golf cart makers have completely captured the mainstream highway market.
You nailed it.
But wait, If these executives at the big companies aren't stupid and they can physically see the golf cart getting faster every year, what invisible force stops them from just building their own before it's too late?
Why they just stand there and let it happen?
Yeah.
This brings us away from the engineering labs and straight into the boardroom. It's all about the financial structures that govern decision-making, specifically something called the value network.
The value network. Okay, so this is the specific economic context within which a firm identifies customers, solves problems, and establishes its cost structures.
Right. Different networks place entirely different financial values on product attributes. For instance, in the mainframe computer value network, customers valued total capacity above all else.
And they were willing to pay massive premiums for it.
Exactly. But in the emerging portable computing value network, customers valued ruggedness and small physical size, and they expected to pay much less overall.
The financial realities of those two networks are worlds apart. The research shows that mainframe computer makers who relied on massive 14-inch disk drives structurally required 50 to 60% gross margins.
They needed those margins just to pay for their massive overhead. Their global direct sales forces, the executive bonus pools.
But the desktop computer makers, utilizing smaller 5.25-inch drives, operated in a completely different value network.
Yeah, they sold through different channels, had leaner operations, and only needed about 25% gross margins to survive and thrive.
And that difference in required gross margin dictates what a corporation literally can and cannot do.
It acts as an invisible filter on innovation. A project that yields a 30% margin looks like a massive win to a desktop company.
But to a mainframe company, a 30% margin project looks like a financial disaster that will tank their stock price and get the CEO fired.
Which brings us to the story of Seagate and the 3.5-inch disk drive.
Oh, this story is wild. Seagate was the undisputed king of the 5.25-inch drive for desktop computers. They were a titan.
And they were not blind to miniaturization. Their engineers were brilliant. They built 80 working prototypes of a newer, smaller 3.5-inch drive.
They literally had the disruptive technology sitting right on their desks. So, following good management practices, Seagate's marketing department takes these prototypes and shows them to their absolute best customer, IBM.
And IBM evaluates the prototypes and rejects them.
Just flat out.
Yep. At the time, IBM was designing their next generation of desktop PCs, and they needed drives that held 40 to 60 megabytes. Seagate's new 3.5-inch prototypes only held 20 megabytes.
And because the manufacturing process was new, they actually cost more per megabyte to build.
Right, exactly. IBM had a rational business need, and the new tech failed to meet it.
So the marketing team goes back to the Seagate executives with pessimistic sales forecasts.
Then the financial analysts look at the numbers. They see a smaller drive with worse profit margins targeting a totally unproven laptop market that barely exists yet.
So the finance team asks the logical question: why allocate millions in engineering resources to a low-margin product that our best customer hates, when we could allocate those same resources to building higher capacity drives for IBM, who was ready to write us a massive check today?
Right.
Here's where it gets really interesting for me, though.
Yeah.
Doesn't it make perfect logical sense to avoid cannibalizing your own core product?
It does.
I mean, if Seagate pushes the smaller drive, they are actively choosing to sell a lower margin product to replace a higher margin one. If you are sitting in that boardroom, fiduciary duty basically mandates that you kill the 3.5-inch drive.
You are touching on the absolute core of the innovator's dilemma right there. The logic is flawless.
Right.
Every rational, data-driven metric, every financial model, and every piece of customer feedback tells you to shelve the disruptive technology. It is good management.
But the trap is this: if you do not cannibalize yourself, an entrant firm will eventually do it for you from below.
And you will not survive the transition.
Which is exactly how it played out. Seagate shelved the 3.5-inch drive to focus on IBM. A group of frustrated Seagate engineers quit, walked out the door, and founded a startup called Connor Peripherals.
And because IBM didn't want their smaller drives, Connor had to hunt for a completely new market.
Through trial and error, they found Compaq, who was trying to pioneer portable laptop computers.
Right. Compaq didn't care that the drives lacked massive storage capacity. They cared that the drives were small and could survive being bumped around in a briefcase.
So Connor Peripherals sold millions of these drives, used the revenue to improve the technology at lightning speed, and eventually, the 3.5-inch drives had enough capacity to invade the desktop market.
Seagate got completely blindsided by their own invention precisely because they listened to their best customer.
It is a sobering reality for any market leader, but, it is tempting to write this off as a phenomenon exclusive to Silicon Valley.
Oh, for sure. We assume disk drives move so fast that executives just get caught off guard.
However, the data proves this is a structural law of business, not a speed issue. We can see the exact same financial dynamics play out in an industry that moves at a glacial pace: mechanical excavators.
We are talking about massive earth-moving equipment, which is about as far from a microchip as you can get.
Right, let's look at the 20-year mudslide of the excavator industry. Back in the early 1920s, the industry experienced a massive technological shift from steam-powered shovels to gasoline-powered engines.
It was a radical, complex change in engineering, yet the leading companies completely dominated the transition. 23 of the top 25 steam shovel makers successfully pivoted to become the dominant gasoline shovel makers.
Wow.
They survived that transition because the gasoline engine was a sustaining innovation.
It allowed the established companies to give their mainstream customers, major mining operations and heavy general contractors, exactly what they already valued: more power to move, more earth, faster, and at a lower operating cost.
The gasoline engine fits seamlessly into their existing value network.
But then, right after World War II, a disruptive technology enters the scene: hydraulics.
And the earliest hydraulic excavators were remarkably weak. The big mainstream mining contractors needed a machine that could scoop 1 to 4 cubic yards of earth in a single bite.
And the first hydraulic machines could only scoop 1/4 of a cubic yard, and their mechanical reach was limited to just 6 feet.
Just like IBM looking at the early smaller disk drives, the major mining contractors looked at early hydraulic shovels and dismissed them.
Because a quarter-yard scoop is financially useless if you were trying to dig a strip mine or a skyscraper basement.
Because the mainstream customers rejected them, the entrant companies pioneering hydraulic startups like J.C. Bamford and Sherman Products had to find a new market.
They took these small hydraulic backhoes and attached them to the back of standard farm tractors.
Yeah, they started selling them to residential contractors who were building post-war tract housing. Those contractors needed to dig narrow sewer trenches from the street to the houses, a job that previously had to be done by hand.
So for digging a 2-foot wide trench, the weak little hydraulic backhoe was an absolute miracle.
Notice the mechanism at work here. The entrant companies found an entirely new value network. They did not attempt to compete head-on with the giant cable-actuated shovels in the mining sector.
They found a new set of customers who defined performance using completely different metrics.
Right. The residential contractors didn't value massive scoop capacity. They valued shovel width for narrow trenches and the agile maneuverability of a farm tractor.
Meanwhile, the dominant cable shovel makers are observing this new technology. The most prestigious of them all was a company called Bucyrus Erie.
They see hydraulics gaining traction, and they decide they need a hydraulic product.
But remember the trap. They are tethered to the demands of their massive mining customers. Their clients demand large-capacity scoops.
So, Bucyrus Erie engineers an absolute Frankenstein of a machine called the Hydro-Hoe.
The Hydro-Hoe, I love this. They used modern hydraulic cylinders to curl the bucket, but they kept the old-school thick steel cables to actually lift the boom.
It was the only physical way they could make the machine big enough to satisfy their mainstream clients.
That is the equivalent of strapping a jet engine to a horse carriage, just because your wealthiest clients are deeply invested in the equestrian lifestyle.
That's exactly it.
They took a revolutionary new technology and mangled it just to force it into their old value network instead of finding a new market.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the Hydro-Hoe perfectly illustrates the fatal structural flaw in how established companies handle disruption.
Entrant companies take a disruptive technology as it is, limitations and all, and they explore new markets to find a fit.
But established companies operate in reverse. They take their existing market as an immovable given, and they try to warp the new technology to fit their legacy value network.
And it fundamentally does not work. The Hydro-Hoe failed. Meanwhile, the entrants building the small tractor backhoes kept iterating on their hydraulic technology in their profitable residential niche.
The trajectory of hydraulic improvement outpaced the market demand. Eventually, pure hydraulic shovels became powerful enough to lift 4 cubic yards of earth.
The moment that happened, they invaded the mainstream mining market and utterly decimated the old cable shovel companies.
The transition took 20 years instead of 2, but the mechanics of the disruption were absolutely identical to disk drives.
The mechanical excavator timeline is the ultimate proof that disruption is driven by resource allocation and financial structures, not by the sheer speed of technological change.
Exactly.
We're seeing how these historical examples all follow the exact same structural law. So if this is a universal law, we should be able to apply it to a technology and predict exactly how it plays out.
Let's look at a disruption that bridges into the modern era. Flash memory.
Flash memory provides a masterclass in the innovator's dilemma. Flash memory is solid-state storage, meaning it stores data on silicon chips rather than on spinning magnetic platters.
It is brilliant technology. It consumes about 5% of the power of a mechanical disk drive.
And because there are zero moving parts, it is incredibly durable. You can drop it on concrete and your data survives.
Yet, when flash memory first hit the market, it exhibited all the classic disruptive traits.
It was severely limited in storage capacity, and critically, it was up to 50 times more expensive per megabyte than a traditional mechanical disk drive.
50 times.
I get the backhoes, but flash memory started out insanely expensive and incredibly weak in capacity. Who on earth is going to pay 50 times the price for a drive that holds less data?
You physically cannot put that into a desktop computer. No consumer would buy it.
Which is exactly why flash memory did not launch in desktop or laptop computers.
Following the law of disruption, the pioneers of flash memory had to discover a completely new value network where ruggedness and ultra-low power consumption were worth a massive premium.
Through trial and error, they found a foothold in cellular phones, industrial robotics, and fascinatingly portable heart monitoring devices.
Think about it. If a patient is wearing a heart monitor for 48 hours, you cannot strap a spinning, vibrating mechanical disk drive to their chest that drains a heavy battery in 2 hours.
You need solid-state flash memory, and the medical device companies gladly paid the 50x premium for it.
Here is where the resource allocation trap snaps shut on the big companies.
Giant disk drive manufacturers like Seagate and Quantum completely understood flash memory. They possessed the technological capability to engineer it.
They even formed joint ventures with chip fabricators to design early flash products.
They didn't miss the shift because they lacked engineering talent or vision. They missed it because they couldn't force flash memory into the value network that paid their bills.
The math simply does not work for a market leader. If you are a $5 billion corporation, Wall Street demands steady, significant growth.
You might need $500 million in new revenue just to hit your annual targets.
And you cannot generate $500 million by selling tiny batches of expensive flash memory to the makers of portable heart monitors.
The emerging market is simply not large enough to solve the growth needs of a massive organization.
So rational executives pull funding from the flash memory project and reinvest it into fighting for market share in their core multi-billion-dollar mechanical drive business.
It is a phenomenal mechanism.
Yeah.
If you are looking at your own company's P&L today, this is exactly why your finance team is rejecting that weird, low-margin AI project or that tiny, unproven software tool.
It doesn't move the needle for the mothership.
But if you are prepping for a strategy meeting or analyzing a stock for your portfolio, you have to look beyond the technology itself. You have to analyze the value network.
When a strange, underperforming, or unusually expensive new technology appears, don't ask, is this better than our current product?
Ask yourself who values this exact limitation right now, even if it is currently just a toy or a tiny niche market, because that niche market is funding the R&D for the golf cart that will eventually take over the highway.
If an established company wants to survive the structural trap, the data provides only one reliable solution.
You cannot fight the laws of resource allocation within your mainstream organization.
You must spin out an entirely independent, autonomous entity. You have to give that new organization a lean cost structure that allows it to be highly profitable at low margins.
And send it out to find new customers in that new value network, completely separate from the core business.
Exactly.
So what does this all mean? We have covered immense ground today. We have learned that the simple act of listening to your best customers and hitting your financial targets can actively cause your company's demise.
We've seen that the trajectory of technological improvement reliably outpaces what the mainstream market actually needs.
And we've discovered that finding the right value network is vastly more critical than possessing the most advanced technology. You essentially now have a predictive model for corporate survival that most CEOs completely overlook until the disruption has already happened.
This raises an important question, though.
Whoa.
We have analyzed the data across completely different industries, from high-tech silicon to heavy earth-moving equipment. The reality is terrifyingly consistent. Dedicating your resources exclusively to your most profitable, loyal clients creates a structural blind spot that obscures the exact technology that will ultimately replace you.
Because those best clients only ever demand that you make the legacy products they already buy, just slightly faster and slightly cheaper.
Precisely.
So the question I want to leave you with is this. If the data definitively proves that you should not anchor your future to the demands of your best customers, who should you be listening to today?
Wow.
Perhaps the key to your next massive breakthrough or the early warning sign of your company's downfall lies entirely in the people who are currently ignoring your products altogether.